Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a mix of my first impressions and reaction to the Rhythm of War US cover, and then also some of your initial thoughts. It feels a little selfish, but I'm gonna start with my impressions simply because I think once I see some of the things that all of you bring up, it might change my perspective a little. Complete transparency, the very first thought I had was, is that actually the cover? And not because it's poorly done or anything like that, but simply because I actually saw it on someone's Instagram stories before I saw Brandon Sanderson share it. So then I was like, is the cover out? And then I typed trying to find it and things weren't coming up and I kind of had to search. And then I saw an article that somebody had, I think it was a blog, and then they were talking about it and I was like, is it the cover though, or is this just a mock-up? So strangely, I feel like my very first impression was swayed because I was sitting there like, kind of trying to pick it apart, like, is it the real cover? And then I feel like it wasn't a genuine, oh cool, the new cover is out. But then once it was confirmed that it was real and I did my research and everything, I was trying to kind of decide, because my first impression, I am not actually the biggest fan of any of the US Stormlight Archive cover images. I want to be very clear in that I think the artwork is amazing. I think Michael Whelan is extremely skilled, and I think we're very fortunate to have someone doing artwork like this for the covers. But for my personal taste, for some reason, it just never really clicked for me. We see this one, it's got the character front and center. The colors, they're super vibrant, which the other ones, they have a lot of color, but they're kind of muted, and this one to me feels so intense. I actually made a little collage where you can see them kind of all side by side. And it not only has really vivid colors, but it's got a lot of color. I'm not opposed to the embracing of a lot of colors by any means. I especially think that when you see it in its entirety, I'll put up an actual image, but I have my iPad to look at it. But I think when you see it in its entirety, I like it more. There's something about the entire image that I think is really cool. However, I do think it's kind of similar, the positioning of things, to the Words of Radiance cover, which there's nothing wrong with, but the position, I don't want to say the characters' names that is in the back portion of Words of Radiance because I don't want to spoil things. I want this to be spoiler free. But the position of the other character on the back is kind of like the position of the character on the back of this one. I think my favorite thing about the cover though is that it captures both the fantasy feeling and the science fiction feeling, because I think Sanderson's world in Stormlight Archive, it kind of does resemble science fiction in this sense. It's like sci-fantasy in a way. And so I think this cover captures that better than the ones in the past. And that's just my perception of the tone of the story. I do want to go a little bit more in depth with comparisons between the new one and the older ones, and just some things for my personal taste that are a little frustrating to me. So when I made the collage, I did notice, and I had to check my own copies to see if this is even the case, that the placement of things like New York Times bestselling author, that's up way at the top, in the images I found, those were not placed in the same spot. However, it was consistent with the first two. You have that text way up high, and then you've got his name, Brandon Sanderson, really big, and then you've got the title of the book, all that's really similar. And then you also have the placement of book 1 and book 2, that text, I don't know if you can see it very well, but that text right there and that text right there in a very similar place. However, when you compare the second and the third, text placement changes slightly. You still have his name, giant, way at the top, and then the New York Times bestselling author thing is here instead of above his name. And then you have where it says that it's book 3, you have that way at the bottom, which is different than the first two, where they had that under the name of the book. Looking at Oathbringer into Rhythm of War, the placement of it saying it's book 4 is along the bottom, so that stayed the same. But then we changed the placement of where it says number 1, New York Times bestselling author, at least in the images we're seeing right now, that is back to being up. Actually, it's not even above his name, it's now below his name. And that kind of stuff doesn't have anything to do with the actual cover art. It just has to do with the placement and the design. And those little things are not that important, but they do frustrate me a little bit because I love consistency in my covers, and I would just prefer if they would stick to the placement of those things being the same from one cover to the next. I would imagine that some of the changing of text to different places has to do with the cover image and doing what they think is best as far as the placement of the cover image. If the cover image itself is up a little higher in order to show the artwork in a way where you're not interrupting it with text, then of course you're gonna have to move things around. It's just, I love consistency, and I would love if the text was just always right in the same spots. So overall, I know it's probably seemed like I've been quite critical of it. I think that the cover is gorgeous. I think it's very eye-catching. I can't wait to see it in person. I hope the colors are just as vivid in person. The consistency thing, I think that they already sort of changed some of the placement with the third book. So if they then went back to where they placed things before in the fourth and fifth, then I would always look at Oathbringer like, why are you different? So it worked out, I think, to have it start to change slightly, because then it's just always, you know, oh, that might change. So it's really not a big deal at all. Overall, I think that it's a great cover. I like it very much. It's just that it's not my favorite style of cover, but that's okay. I think it works for Stormlight. Now on to your reactions. I'm going to not touch on any of the ones that maybe are spoilery, or I'll slightly edit them if they are spoilery and be more vague. But a lot of them, the first ones I'm seeing, are super pumped. The first one says, flippin' beautiful, the talent of some people. Yes, I think the cover, it's the coolest that is in the series so far. It's so beautiful, I'm buying it now. This one doesn't love it as much. It says, it looks way different than I thought it would. Kind of seems it doesn't fit with the others. I think when I first saw it, I thought that a little bit, but I also think that when I put them all together, it fits more than I realized. I think because the color scheme, there's so much more color that I was like, oh, that's different than I was expecting. And the character is so front and center compared to the others where they're a little bit further back. But I also think that it kind of works. I also think we're going to get a little bit of a shift in the fourth book as far as, I can't really get into spoilers, but I think we're going to get some shifts in the fourth book. And so I think that having a slightly different focus and color scheme works. But I also think that, like I said, once I saw the image in its entirety, that it's actually not too different from the placement of things in Words of Radiance. And also, while the colors seemed more vibrant to me than the others, when I saw them together, they didn't as much. This one, it says intriguingly confusing, and I think that that's fairly accurate. This one I have to slightly edit to not give away spoilers, but it says that they love it. They're just wondering if that location is what they think it is. And I think that's something a lot of us are going to wonder. If you want to give your thoughts about that, just write spoilers for your comment. But a lot of people, I think, are wondering, is it them maybe going into this place? Is it them in this place? And what's going on exactly? Because you also see what looks like kind of like waves, which sort of has to do with this place. It's very hard to not just talk about it. Ha! This one says, I'm living for that outfit. You know, I would wear it. Oh man, this one, now that this person has said this, I can't unsee it. They said Nancy Drew? LOL, that was my first thought. Oh man, I have to go back to it. It does kind of. Like a science fiction fantasy version of Nancy Drew. A couple people now I've seen who have never read the series feel that this cover is so eye-catching and gorgeous that they're now interested in reading the series. So hey, you're definitely doing your job well if you can get people who have never read the series interested on book 4. This person says just too much. They just feel like there's too much going on. And I think that that's kind of, it's not that I think there's too much going on, like there's anything wrong with that, just for my personal taste. I think that is why I will never absolutely love the covers of these books. But given that there already is a decent amount going on the other covers, I think in that regard it sort of fits. But there is more going on maybe a little bit than the other covers. This one says, yes, for the lady on the cover of an epic fantasy. What I will add, this is kind of a random thing. Was anybody surprised that the character on the cover of the third one, that they got to be on the cover of one of the books before the character on the cover of the fourth one? I would have thought that they would have swapped. Especially if you read the second one and then you have avoided spoilers for the third, to then see that character, you're like, wait a second, that kind of spoiled some stuff for me. So I feel like maybe it would have been cool to have that other character on the cover of the other. Man, I wish I could say the character names. Kind of touching on that, this one says that Michael's art is always beautiful. I love old fantasy art, but I'd loved to have another character on it. And I don't think I agree necessarily, just simply because this character is such a major character, and for them to have not had a cover yet is a little weird to me. So I think that it's good that they got a cover, but again, I do think that it would have made more sense if they'd gotten a cover on the third one and then a different character was on the cover of this one. Maybe this would be too on the nose, but for those that don't know, Stormlight Archive, there's always a character whose past you focus on, you get flashbacks of, things like that, while also getting the present day story. And I've always wondered why the character whose backstory you get isn't the one that's on the cover, because there is such a focus of these characters on the covers. I mean, there's always a character on the front, so that has just always been something I've wondered. I don't know, again, if maybe it would have just been too obvious, but that's something fans know ahead of time anyway, when they're looking forward to the next one, and they're like, whose book is it gonna be? And then they find out. I've just always thought it was interesting they didn't just put that character on the cover. Does anybody else feel like that would have worked, or is that too on the nose? Do you think that's just too obvious? Ooh, I like this one. I don't know if I agree with this. I have to look at them again. It says, I just realized that as the series progresses, the covers get darker and darker. Let me go back to my my little collage here. Okay, so here's the collage. I'll just put the image up. You don't need to look at my iPad. The crummy. Look at this blurry reflective image. I mean, it's hard to tell because the color scheme is so different from book to book that the last one definitely is the darkest so far. So maybe you're onto something with that. But I mean, tragic stuff happens all throughout, but then there is a part of me that's like, oh, are we gonna get a lot of death in this one? Because I'd be down for it. I like this one. It's kind of like the intriguingly confusing one. This one says cool, beautiful, and weird. I don't know if this person is just referring to Stormlight or if they're referring to all books ever. It says best cover I have seen to date on any book, to be honest. If you mean any cover, then I'm super pumped for you that this art style fits so perfectly to your taste. Ooh, I like that this person brought this up because I had like kind of noticed this, but not really to the extent this person did. So if you look in the background to the character that's not on the front, they'll be on the back. And you can see on the rock, there's kind of a rainbowy image. And this person is wondering, I have to edit out the person's name, but that character's sword gives off a rainbow glow. What does that mean? And yeah, nice observation. I don't know if it's from the sword or if it's light reflecting from something else and then landing on the rock, but I like it. Overall, I am so happy that so many of you are super pumped about this cover. For those of you that have never read Stormlight Archive, but now you want to because of this cover, that makes my Stormlight Archive loving heart very happy because I want more people to read these. And I know the size is intimidating, but if the covers can bring you in, please, you're welcome. Please come. For me, that Way of Kings, the cover of that one might be my favorite. And then this one, I don't know, I really like the colors and I like the entirety of this one a lot. So I think those two, I like both of those. I could go back and forth. I think Words of Radiance is my second favorite, and then Oathbringer, purely because Oathbringer, while I think the imagery itself is really cool on the actual cover, I'm not a fan of that color palette. So yeah, Way of Kings and Rhythm of War covers up at the top, and then the other ones. And I'm hoping that'll be my ranking for the books as well, because currently Way of Kings has been my favorite book out of all of them, and I love the other ones, but they have kind of gone down slightly for me in how I've felt about them. I still think they're amazing, and I'm hoping this next one is gonna go way up, and I'm just gonna love it so much. If you want to see more Stormlight Archive content, I'll have my other stuff linked in the description bar down below, and then also if you're wanting to chat predictions for the next one, I'll link that specific video as well. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.